And Donald mentioned, because he mentioned me in his answer, that his position on immigration is what's driven this debate. Well, the truth is, though, that a lot of these positions that he's now taking are new to him. In 2011, he talked about the need for a pathway to citizenship. In 2012, Donald criticized Mitt Romney, saying that Mitt lost his election because of self-deportation. And so even today, we saw a report in one of the newspapers that, Donald, you've hired a significant number of people from other countries to take jobs that Americans could have filled. My mom and dad, my mom was a maid at a hotel, and instead of hiring an American like her, you have brought in over 1,000 people from all over the world to fill those jobs instead. So I think this is an important issue. And I think we all realize increasingly that's an important issue for the country that's been debated for 30 years, but finally needs to be solved once and for all.
Mr. Trump?
Well, first of all, self-deportation is people are going to leave as soon as they see others going out. If you look at Dwight Eisenhower in the 1950s, they started moving people out and the rest of them left. Self-deportation, as I really define it, and that's the way I define it, is you're going to get some to go and the rest are going to go out. As far as the people that I've hired in various parts of Florida during the absolute prime season, like Palm Beach and other locations, you could not get help. It's the up season. People didn't want to have part-time jobs. They were part-time jobs, very seasonal, 90-day jobs, 120-day jobs, and you couldn't get. Everybody agrees with me on that. They were part-time jobs. You needed them, or we just might as well close the doors because you couldn't get help in those hot sections of Florida.
My point that I made was that you had criticized Mitt Romney for self-deportation. You said that his strategy of self-deportation is why he lost the election. And I think people in Florida would be surprised because, in fact, the article that was today, they interviewed a number of people that would have been willing to do those jobs if you had been willing to hire them to do it.
I criticize Mitt Romney for losing the election. He should have won that election. He had a failed president. He ran a terrible campaign. He was a terrible candidate. That's what I criticize Mitt Romney.
Well,
I mean, he ran one terrible campaign. That's an election that should have been won.
Well, in fact, I agree we should have won, and I wish we would have. But in fact, you did criticize him for using the term self-deportation. I mean, that's on the record, and people can look it up right now online. But again, I just want to reiterate, I think it's really important, this point. I think it's fine. It's an important point that you raise and we discuss on immigration. This is a big issue for Texas, a huge issue for the country. But I also think that if you're going to claim that you're the only one that lifted this into the campaign, that you acknowledge that, for example, you're the only person on the stage that's ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. You hired some workers from Poland.
I'm the only one on the stage that's hired people. You haven't hired anybody.
Well, in fact, some of the people who
by the way,
well, but hold on.
I've hired, and by the way, I've hired tens of thousands of people over my job. You've hired
1,000 people
You've
from
had
another
nothing
company,
but problems
from another
with your
country.
credit cards, etc.
Let me say,
let me
finish the statement. This is important.
You haven't hired one person
He
in
hired
your life.
workers from Poland, and he had to pay $1 million or so in a judgment.
That's wrong.
That's a fact.
Totally wrong.
Well, people can look it up. I'm sure people are Googling it right now. Look it up. Trump Polish workers. You'll see $1 million for hiring illegal workers on one of his projects. Yeah, he did.
You know, it's interesting.
That happened.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my lifetime. Tens of thousands.
Many from other countries instead of hiring Americans.
Be quiet. Let me talk. I've hired tens of thousands of people. He brings up something from 30 years ago. It worked out very well. Everybody was happy.
Paid $1 million.
And by the way, the laws were totally different. Right. That was a whole different world.
Thank you.
Right. But I've hired people. Nobody up here has hired
Senator
anybody.
Cruz, you say you want to deport the 11 million undocumented immigrants, but you never want to allow them to come back to the United States. What would happen to the children who are U.S.-born citizens whose parents will be deported under your plan?
Well, existing law provides that those who are deported cannot come back here legally. U.S. citizens can come back. That's existing law. But let me say, Wolf, I really find it amazing that Donald believes that he is the one who discovered the issue of illegal immigration. I can tell you, when I ran for Senate here in the state of Texas, I ran promising to lead the fight against amnesty, promising to fight to build a wall. And in 2013, when I was leading the fight against the Gang of Eight amnesty bill, where was Donald? He was firing Dennis Rodman on Celebrity Apprentice. And indeed, if you look at the Gang of Eight, one individual on this stage broke his promise to the men and women who elected him and wrote the amnesty bill. But Donald funded the Gang of Eight. If you look at the 8 members of the Gang of Eight, Donald gave over $50,000 to 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And when you're funding open border politicians, you shouldn't be surprised when they fight for open borders. And I think if you want to know who actually will secure the borders and follow through, you ought to ask who has a record before they were a candidate for president of fighting to secure the borders and stop amnesty, and I'm the only one on this stage that has that record. And by the way, Marco is exactly right that a federal court found Donald guilty of being part of a conspiracy to hire people illegally and entered a $1 million judgment against them.
Mr. Trump.
I can only say this, and I've said it loud and clear, and I've said it for years. And many of these people are sitting right in the audience right now, your lobbyists and your special interests and your donors, because the audience is packed with them, and they're packed with you. I've had an amazing relationship with politicians, both Democrat, Republican, because I was a businessman. As one magazine said, he's a world-class businessman. He was friendly with everybody. I got along with everybody. You get along with nobody. You don't have one Republican. You don't have one Republican senator, and you work with them every day of your life, although you skipped a lot of time. These are minor details. But you don't have one Republican senator backing you, not one. You don't have the endorsement of one Republican senator, and you work with these people.
Senator Cruz.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
You know, I actually think Donald is right. He is promising if he's elected, he will go and cut deals in Washington, and he's right. He has supported, he has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Democrats. Anyone who really cared about illegal immigration wouldn't be hiring illegal immigrants. Anyone who really cared about illegal immigration wouldn't be funding Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, wouldn't be funding the Gang of Eight. And, you know, he is right. When you stand up to Washington, when you honor the promise you made to the men and women who elected you and say enough with the corruption, enough with the cronyism, let's actually stand for the working men and women of this country, Washington doesn't like it. And, Donald, if you want to be liked in Washington, that's not a good attribute for a president.
Hey, here's a man, Robin Hood. This is Robin Hood over here. He talks about corruption on his financial disclosure form. He didn't even put that he's borrowed money from Citibank and from Goldman Sachs, which is a total violation. He didn't talk about the fact that he pays almost no interest. He just left it off, and now he's going to protect the people from the big bad banks.
We're going to move on to Governor Kasich. Governor Kasich.